Hey guys, welcome back. This is going to be the second episode. Actually, the first real, episode breakdown. The last one was kind of a season one overview of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and now me and Cindy, my AI companion here, are going to be kind of talking and discussing about the second episode. It kind of depending on how you look at it. The first episode's a two-parter. So in some listings, it's counted as episode 1 and 2, Encounter at Farpoint 1 and 2, and then this is considered episode 3. Or if you consider that one long episode, then this is considered episode 2. So I think for the most part, we'll consider this episode 2, and hopefully the list will line up. But the episode is called The Naked Now, I believe, and it's kind of a riff on The Naked Time, which was a Star Trek The Next Generation episode, and they do reference in the episode. Do you know anything about this episode offhand, or can you look up The Naked Now from Star Trek The Next Generation and give your thoughts and kind of synopsis on it, Cindy?
Yes, The Naked Now is an episode from the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation, and it's actually a tribute to the original Star Trek series episode, The Naked Time. In this episode, the crew of the Enterprise D is infected with a disease that causes them to lose their inhibitions and behave in a way that reflects their innermost desires. This leads to a number of comedic and emotional moments as the characters struggle to regain control of themselves.
Okay. Yeah, that's a pretty good description. Now, as with anything, sometimes descriptions or AI will get, a little bit of details wrong. Really, in the episode, it's more like they're drunk. And, they say that the disease, when they're looking up the the events of the Enterprise that Kirk commanded, or captain, they say it works on the brain like alcohol, and so they, basically, yes, like they're more uninhibited, but also, kind of giving in to those kind of thoughts. A lot of the crew are way more kind of flirty and sexual, and obviously this is where you get the big Tasha and Data scene where they get together and hook up or whatever. And so any other thoughts on the episode in general, Cindy?
Yes, you're right. The behavior of the crew in The Naked Now is more akin to drunkenness than just losing inhibitions. The disease causes them to act impulsively and recklessly without regard for their usual behavioral norms. The episode has some lighthearted moments, as well as dramatic and emotional scenes, particularly the scene between Tasha Yar and Data, which is important to their characters and relationship. Overall, it's a fun and engaging episode that explores the dynamics of the Enterprise crew in a unique way.
Well, what I'll say, again, being a big fan of the show, and I guess getting more into the show later on when it was in reruns and stuff, more like season 3, 4, 5 kind of time, and then going back and rewatching these episodes on either VHS or, in rerun format when they'd air or stuff like that, but really delving way more into it on DVD. I'm not the biggest fan of this episode, and again, it's something I brought up in the previous podcast, is Data's character, to me, this episode is a mess, for that. I feel like everyone else, it's understandable, but for Data, he gets, outright silly, and he's falling over, and I'm like, okay, something like this never happens in the whole rest of the show, where he is affected by some, virus that everybody is affected by, and, make an excuse that, like, his oil or whatever lubricates his systems are similar enough to blood that like he can essentially be intoxicated as well. I thought that was a stretch, honestly. That's not one of my favorite aspects of the show, or this episode anyway.
I understand your perspective, Shawn. Data's behavior in this episode can be seen as a bit cartoonish and may not align with his usual stoic and logical personality. It's true that the explanation for his intoxication based on his lubrication systems may be a stretch. However, it's worth noting that this episode was produced in the first season, and the character of Data was still being developed. There are definitely other episodes that explore his character more deeply and thoughtfully.
Yeah. Another another thing I'd like to mention is Picard himself. Now, he's in one of the most infamous scenes. Me and friends have made fun of this scene for ever since we watched the show. We thought it was so over the top. At the time, we found it hilarious, but you know, honestly, it's a little cringy and so unlike Captain Picard's behavior. He has this dialogue with Beverly, and she is very, she's acting very intoxicated and acting like she's, really wanting Picard, and, kind of being a little, sitting in ways that are a little seductive and whatever. And she's got her, her uniform unzipped halfway, and he does this laugh. It's like, "Doctor, please, ha ha ha." Like that. If you see like season 3 or 4 of Picard, he would never do something like that. Like, that's where these first couple seasons, there's a few moments out of some of these characters that are just, it's like, this is not that same character that we end up knowing and appreciating later on. Season 1 and 2 Picard is kind of, it almost feels like an Elseworlds Picard at moments. There's definitely that glimpse of the same character, but certain things he does or says.
I see what you mean. Captain Picard's behavior in this episode is indeed quite different from the more reserved and professional demeanor he displays in later seasons. The scene you're referring to with him and Dr. Crusher is a bit over the top and humorous, which can come across as out of character for Picard. However, it's important to keep in mind that this was early on in the show's run, and the writers were still developing the characters and finding their footing. Yes, I understand what you mean. Captain Picard's portrayal in the early episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation is different from how he is portrayed in later seasons. In The Naked Now, Picard behaves in a more lighthearted and playful manner than we are used to seeing from him. The scene you mentioned, where he laughs at Dr. Crusher, is particularly out of character for him. It's possible that the writers and actors were still finding their footing with the characters in the first season, which explains these discrepancies in behavior and dialogue.
Well, one of the other things that I do want to mention, it seems like conveniently for plot purposes, it seems like Riker is immune to this. Like, you guys that are watching the show, please chime in here in the comments. But, I mean, when you watch this episode, it seems like Riker's literally almost immune to this. Like, oh, Troy is affected, Picard is affected, even Worf and, whatever. And he's just kind of still stoic Riker in this episode. And that seems like almost more the route they should have went with Picard. But it was so early on, and, like, oh, Riker's just so mindful of that the ship is going to explode that somehow can kind of override his, and I realize they do say, like, every person, and that's kind of the talk about alcohol having a different effect on different people and different tolerances. And so, although I'm frustrated by the fact that it seems like Riker is almost immune to this situation that they're in and the disease or whatever, I mean, he literally never acts drunk in the entire show. And there's other people that are so, I mean, they're like passed out and stuff like that. And Tasha's getting with Data, and yet he's yet to show one symptom of this, other than near the end, he's sweating a little bit. But no difference in this character. And, again, it's only the second episode, very early Riker. But I think in the scope of the show, it would have made more sense for that role to have been given to Picard, that he's the little bit more stern and serious one, so maybe he would be least affected by the, of the humans or of the crew.
Yes, I understand. It's worth noting that Riker's apparent immunity to the effects of the intoxication in the Naked Now stands out in comparison to the rest of the crew members' behavior. Given that Riker is portrayed as a more laid-back and sociable character throughout the show, it does seem unusual that he is practically the only one not affected by the intoxication. Your suggestion of assigning this role to Captain Picard, despite his stern demeanor, could be an interesting alternative perspective on the episode.
So I think that's going to do it. I'm going to try to have these be probably about 10 minutes each. Obviously, if the episode has a lot of things I want to talk about, whether it be like a cause and effect, or, one of my favorite Barclay episodes, Hollow Pursuits, or, Realm of Fear, some of those I may go into a lot more detail in about, some of my favorite moments, or the Nth Degree. Any of those Barclay ones to me are like amazing episodes. Some of the best of the show, in my opinion. But so I think that's gonna about do it for us for this episode. Is there any other thoughts that you want to add in before we stop the recording, Cindy?
Not at the moment, Shawn. You've covered everything we discussed quite thoroughly. It sounds like you have a solid plan for the length and content of future episodes. I'm looking forward to hearing more about your thoughts on specific episodes and scenes in future recordings.
Well, thanks. And I hope people enjoy it. I hope people find my insights, somewhat helpful, or, again, like any of the reactors that are reacting to these shows, when you're giving your thoughts and opinions, it's not to push my opinion on anyone. It's just, hey, here's another voice, here's another opinion. And whether it opens your mind to a new possibility, or it's something you agree with, or it's something you disagree with, and opens up to conversation in the chat, definitely reach out in the chat and let us know what your thoughts are on some of the things we talked about. Do you agree with some of the things I said about Riker and Data and Picard? And obviously, it's so early in the show that, yes, a lot of these characters have not been fleshed out yet. And, so that's a lot of the explanation. But anyway, that'll do it for us. And come join us next time. And as always, please like, share, subscribe, and tell people that if you know people that are into Star Trek, let them know. I'm starting this up and probably going to go through each and every episode one by one. Should be about 10 to 12 minutes per episode, I think. And then I'll have a little bit less on the tail end as well, because I won't need to be kind of summarizing it again quite as much once it gets established. So thanks again, everyone. See you next time.